The day silence was torn apart. They came dressed like soldiers, faces masked, voices calm, but their silence screamed terror. April 22nd, 2025, a day that turned the paradise of Pahalgam into a graveyard. Families on vacation never returned. Children watched their parents collapse. A woman was spared, not out of mercy but to deliver a message: go tell Modi. What happened next wasn't just a military response, it was an emotional eruption. This is not just a story of blood and betrayal. It's a haunting journey through survival, strategy, and justice. This is the story of the Pahalgam massacre and the storm that followed. Whispers in the Valley. The morning of April 22nd began like a dream. Pahalgam's lush green meadows sparkled under the golden sun as tourists filled the Baisaran Valley. Nicknamed Mini Switzerland, the valley was alive with the sounds of pony bells, laughter, and the distant buzz of drones capturing panoramic videos. Among them were the Jagdale family, Santosh, Pragati, and their two young children, riding on ponies guided by a friendly Kashmiri handler. The family laughed as their son made a funny face for the camera. Santosh turned to Pragati and whispered, "This is what peace looks like." But behind the serene backdrop, 5 men watched. Hidden behind the deodar trees, they wore Indian Army uniforms. But something about them was off. They weren't joking, weren't chatting. Their eyes were fixed, cold. Each one held a weapon: M4 carbines, AK-47s. They moved in perfect formation, silent and deadly. At 11:38 a.m., chaos erupted. The attackers moved out from the tree line like ghosts emerging from shadows. The first shots were precise, loud cracks that echoed off the valley walls. Tourists screamed, ponies fled. People dropped to the ground, some in terror, some already lifeless. But the attackers weren't spraying bullets randomly. They were selecting targets. "Nam batao," one said to a trembling man. "Ram Prasad," he replied. A single shot to the chest. The attackers weren't just killing. They were interrogating, asking for religion, asking people to recite the Kalima. Those who could were spared. Those who couldn't fell. Pragati clutched her children and screamed as Santosh tried to shield them. He stood, arms raised. "We're tourists," he shouted. "Please." A masked man approached, looked Santosh in the eyes. "Hindu ho?" Santosh nodded. A gunshot tore through the valley again. Santosh collapsed. Pragati wailed. One of the attackers grabbed her arm and pulled her up. The children cried uncontrollably. The man leaned close, his voice cold. "You will live. Go tell Modi." The message was clear. This was more than murder. It was a statement. They left her there, blood on her hands, silence in her throat. And then, like shadows, the killers disappeared back into the forest, leaving behind 26 bodies, dozens injured, and a valley soaked in grief. The women who survived. That evening, as news channels scrambled for details, one phrase echoed across every screen: "Go tell Modi." It wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. The women who survived were in shock. Some still wore the clothes soaked in blood. Others hadn't even realized they were alive. But one by one, they came forward. Pragati was the first. On national TV, her voice quivered, but her message was firm. "They told me to tell Modi. I am telling him. They didn't just kill our husbands. They killed peace." In homes across India, millions watched in silence. The image of Pragati, her eyes swollen but dry, became a symbol. 6 widows, silent, shattered, and yet standing. Candle marches lit up cities. From Pune to Patna, Bangalore to Bhopal, the outrage spread like wildfire. People weren't just angry, they were devastated. These were not soldiers, these were families, children, tourists. The Prime Minister broke his silence 48 hours later. No speeches, just a single tweet. "We will not forget, we will not forgive." But deep in the Ministry of Defense, plans were already in motion. Code names, coordinates, dossiers. A high-level meeting brought together officials from RAW, NIA, and all three branches of the military. Satellite images showed 9 terror facilities in Pakistan and POK, training grounds, weapon depots, safe houses, and each one was marked in red. One officer, looking at a photo of the 6 widows, whispered, "We'll name it Operation Sindoor." Someone asked why. He replied, "Because they took away the Sindoor from our daughters. This one's for them." It was more than an operation. It was justice wrapped in fire. The mountains of Kashmir have seen centuries of conflict. But never before had they seen a storm like this, born from grief shaped by resolve. April 22nd was supposed to be a day of leisure. It became a chapter written in blood. But it didn't end in silence. It ended with a voice carried by wind, fire, and justice. They told her, "Go tell Modi." She did, and the nation replied, not with vengeance, but with Operation Sindoor. Let this story remind us, terror can shake us, but it cannot silence us. Ashes in the meadow. The gunfire had stopped, but the echoes still hung in the valley like ghosts refusing to leave. By the time the first security team reached Basaran, the meadow had turned into a graveyard. Silence loomed over the once bustling landscape. Cameras, shoes, handbags, bloodied toys, and half-eaten lunchboxes lay scattered like confessions of panic. The ponies that had fled now stood quietly at the edge of the forest, as if mourning. Pragati sat on the ground, motionless. Her children clung to her like shadows, faces buried in her arms. She didn't cry, not anymore. Her tears had dried up somewhere between Santosh's fall and the masked man's whisper in her ear. A young CRPF Jawan approached cautiously. "Madam, Apti Kane." She looked up blankly, her voice cracked. "They told me to tell Modi." Behind her, stretchers carried the lifeless. Local villagers gathered around, stunned. A few wept. Some stared silently. One boy clutched his phone, recording everything. "The world needs to see this," he whispered. News vans raced into Pahalgam by dusk. Journalists jostled for space, desperate to find survivors, officials, anyone with answers. Drones flew overhead. The blood was still fresh on the stones. Inspector Riaz Shah from Anand police knelt by a body, his gloved hands trembling. "This wasn't random," he murmured. "They selected, they asked names." Files flew across desks that night. Conflicting numbers, panicked statements, missing tourists, unconfirmed identities. The government ordered an immediate investigation. NIA officers arrived within hours, cordoning off the valley. Evidence teams collected bullets, shoe prints, food wrappers, anything. But what haunted them most were the children. A little girl named Anya, just 5, walked silently through the carnage. She held a red balloon, still intact. "Papa kaha hai?" she asked every uniformed man she saw. One paramedic wept silently. By midnight, 26 were confirmed dead, dozens injured, hundreds traumatized. The press called it the Pahalgam Massacre. But to those who had survived it, it was something else entirely. It was a fracture in faith, a place of peace, turned battlefield, and the beginning of a long, dark reckoning. Operation Sindoor. The war room buzzed with quiet intensity. Behind closed doors, military planners, RAW operatives, and cyber analysts pored over maps lit by red and blue markers. Every target, every asset, every movement was under surveillance. But this wasn't just a strike plan. It was a moral reckoning. General Vikram Suri, a seasoned officer with a steely gaze, led the meeting. "We don't need a war. We need precision," he said, tapping a digital screen. 9 blinking red dots represented the identified terror bases, from Muzaffarabad to Kotli. Each had a history of bloodshed. This time, they would pay. Across the room, a young intelligence officer named Lieutenant Nisha Rao quietly stepped forward. In her hand was a folded photograph, the 6 widows standing beside their husbands' funeral pyres. She placed it on the table. "This isn't just retaliation, it's remembrance." A silence fell. The defense minister nodded. "The operation will be called Sindoor," Outside the base, Indian Air Force jets were already being prepped. Drones were armed. Signals intercepted. A cyber blackout plan was approved to ensure Pakistani response capabilities would be blinded in the first 10 minutes. Naval commandos waited offshore, ready for diversionary pressure. Social media had gone dark. Government servers scrubbed all activity. No one knew, not even close family of the pilots, what was coming. On the night of May 6th, every participating soldier received a sealed envelope. Inside, their target coordinates and a line from the Prime Minister's message: "Do not act out of revenge. Strike for justice." By morning, they would be in the skies. As dawn approached, journalists sensed something was up. Unusual aircraft movement in Ambala, closed airspace in Rajasthan, but no one could confirm it. India, meanwhile, released satellite images showing the precise coordinates of the strike sites, footage of explosions, and intercepted chatter between fleeing operatives. Global analysts confirmed the authenticity. Within days, Pakistan faced inquiries from international watchdogs. The FATF resumed scrutiny over financial flows linked to extremist activity. Several Western embassies issued cautious statements, urging de-escalation but noting India's right to defend its citizens. On social media, Pakistani citizens were divided. Some supported denial, others questioned the silence on training camps. Pakistan's official line remained unchanged at the UN. India fabricated the incident to justify cross-border aggression. But in private diplomatic circles, the message was clear. The world was no longer buying the old script. It was clear. Operation Sindoor had struck more than infrastructure. It had struck narrative control. Meanwhile, Pakistan's denial continued at the UN, but few listened. The silence of the international community spoke louder than words. Inside India, the Prime Minister addressed the nation. This was not an act of war, it was a promise kept. The widows were watching. And when Pragati heard those words, she held her late husband's photo to her chest and whispered, "He heard me." India didn't celebrate. There were no firecrackers, no cheers, only candlelight and silence. The wind still moves through Pahalgam, but it carries a different sound now. Not the laughter of tourists or the chants of pilgrims, but whispers of names, memories, and a question still unanswered. Why? What happened on April 22nd wasn't just a terrorist strike. It was a wound on the soul of a nation. It shattered families, silenced dreams, and turned a picnic into a pilgrimage of pain. But in that pain, something unbreakable awakened. From the shattered meadows rose the voices of survivors, of mothers who buried their sons, of children who held their breath under bodies to live, of a widow who was told to deliver a message, and did. India didn't erupt, it endured. And yet, the story doesn't end with strikes or speeches. It ends with silence, with lamps lit in Kashmir, with a stone circle where strangers now kneel and whisper prayers, with a school named after a boy who never made it home. The world moves fast, headlines fade, but those who carry the loss carry it forever. This was not just a massacre. It was a test of resilience, of remembrance, of resolve. We may lose lives, but not our voice, not our courage, not our unity. And as long as we remember Pahalgam, it will never happen again.
The case may be closed, but criminology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Criminology and step deeper into the dark with us.